Stephanie White had to know her words would land like a grenade. After all, you don't call the absence of Caitlin Clark, the single most important player in the WNBA's current growth, a blessing in disguise, and expect it to just disappear quietly into the post-game noise. But here we are, days later, and the backlash is still building like a tidal wave. Fans, analysts, even former players are calling out the Indiana Fever head coach for what many see as one of the most disrespectful comments a coach could make about her own star. And make no mistake, this isn't just a PR gaffe. It's a full-blown crisis of leadership that puts White's future in question and could have long-term consequences for the franchise.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Clark has been battling a nagging groin injury, the kind that's painful, lingering, and unpredictable. She's been the face of the Fever's turnaround, the reason tickets are selling, the reason national broadcasts have Indiana penciled in for primetime games. And yet, instead of expressing empathy or emphasizing her importance, White framed her absence as an opportunity for the team to find itself without her. The subtext was unmistakable to fans. We might be better off without Caitlin Clark. Whether White intended it that way or not, that's how it landed. And perception in sports is everything. Why the comment cut so deep? Caitlin Clark isn't just another player who happens to be injured. She's the linchpin holding together the Fever's competitive relevance and financial surge. Every packed arena, every new sponsorship deal, every spike in TV ratings, her fingerprints are all over it. To downplay her absence felt, to many, like not just a slight to her, but to the fans who have invested their time, money, and passion into watching her play. Imagine a coach in the NBA calling LeBron James' injury a blessing in disguise during his prime. The headlines would burn for weeks, and the organization's PR team would be in overdrive trying to spin it. That's where the Fever are now. But the problem is, the words came from the head coach herself, the person tasked with maximizing Clark's potential. Fan backlash reaches a fever pitch. The outrage on social media has been relentless. Some fans are outright calling for White's resignation. Others are dissecting her coaching record, pointing to questionable late-game decisions, inconsistent rotations, and a seeming inability to build an offensive system around Clark's strengths. Season ticket holders are publicly questioning whether the team's leadership truly values its star. And this isn't just about one comment anymore. It's about the growing feeling that White and Clark are on different wavelengths, and that's a dangerous place for any franchise to be. The Sophie Cunningham factor. When Sophie Cunningham, one of the most respected locker room voices, chimed in, the tension got even more real. Cunningham didn't name names, but she made it clear in interviews that the Fever should be adjusting their system to fit Clark's unique skill set. That's a direct counterpoint to White's approach, which has been about running a balanced system where no single player dominates. The problem? Balanced systems sound good in theory, but they don't always win games in the modern WNBA. Stars are stars for a reason. They bend defenses, create mismatches, and open up the floor for everyone else. When you have a generational shooter and passer like Clark, not building around her is basketball malpractice. A growing list of coaching missteps. White's critics aren't just pointing to the Clark comment. They're also looking at the team's poor floor spacing that forces Clark into contested threes or desperate drives. The lack of clear offensive hierarchy, leading to role players hijacking possessions in crunch time. Minimal adjustments when opposing defenses trap Clark early, often leaving her stranded without outlets. These aren't just rookie mistakes from a young team. They're systemic coaching issues, and they're robbing Clark of the chance to fully show what she can do. The injury management problem. Another layer to this is how Clark's injury has been handled. There's been little public clarity on whether she's being pushed too hard in rehab or if she's sitting longer than necessary out of caution. Clark herself has been careful with her words, but her body language in some recent pressers, the tight smiles, the clipped answers, suggest frustration. If White's comment was meant to relieve pressure from Clark and the team, it had the opposite effect. It only intensified the scrutiny, making every future interaction between the two a storyline for reporters to watch. jealousy, or just poor judgment. Some fans are going further, suggesting that White's remark wasn't just tone-deaf, it was rooted in jealousy. The theory is that Clark's outsized media presence, endorsement deals, and fan adoration have shifted the spotlight away from the coach, and that might be creating tension behind closed doors. That's speculation, of course, but in sports, perception often fuels reality. If players start believing their coach resents their star, it can fracture locker room chemistry fast. Why this matters for the Fever's future. Clark's rookie deal won't last forever. If the Fever want to keep her long-term, they have to prove they can build a winning environment around her. That means good roster construction, smart coaching, and, critically, showing her that the organization values and supports her fully. Moments like this erode trust. Even if Clark never says a word about the comment publicly, you can bet she noticed. And players of her caliber have options, whether that's pushing for a trade down the road or simply walking when their contract is up. A potential turning point for the WNBA. This controversy also hits at a league-wide issue. How do WNBA teams balance team-first cultures with the reality that stars drive business? For years, the WNBA has prided itself on parity and collective identity. But the modern sports market thrives on individual stardom. Clark isn't just a player, she's a brand, and managing that brand is part of winning. If the Fever don't figure that out, someone else will, and they'll gladly build their entire operation around her. The locker room wild card. Inside the Fever's locker room, this could go one of two ways. Either the team rallies together, brushes it off, and uses it as fuel, or it deepens any existing divides between Clark loyalists and those who think the team should be less star-centric. If it's the latter, the season could spiral fast. Once a locker room starts splitting into sides, it's nearly impossible to get everyone pulling in the same direction again without major changes, often at the coaching level. White's next move is everything. The only way out for White right now is to own the comment publicly, clarify her intent, and reaffirm Clark's central role in the team's identity. That means more than a vague, "we value all our players" statement. It means explicitly stating that the Fever's future is built around Caitlin Clark and backing it up with encore adjustments. If she doubles down or stays silent, the narrative will only harden. She's the coach who doesn't believe in her star. For the fans, this is personal. The Fever fanbase has waited years for this kind of excitement. Clark's arrival turned them from a rebuilding project into a nightly sellout. To hear the coach minimize her absence feels like a slap in the face to the people packing Gainbridge Fieldhouse night after night. For many fans, this isn't about X's and O's, it's about respect. Respect for the player who's revitalized their team, and respect for the investment they've made in following her journey. And that's why this isn't going away anytime soon. Stephanie White's blessing in disguise comment didn't just spark outrage. It pulled back the curtain on deeper tensions in Indiana. Now, the question isn't just whether the Fever can win games. It's whether they can keep their most important player happy enough to want to stay. Because if Caitlin Clark ever feels like she's more valued somewhere else, the Fever won't just lose games. They'll lose the very heartbeat of their franchise. From day one, the problem has been painfully obvious. You've got a generational offensive weapon, someone who can stretch the floor from 30 feet, thread passes through traffic, and control the pace of a game. But the system she's in looks like it was designed for a completely different kind of roster. It's like parking a Ferrari in a cornfield and wondering why it can't hit top speed. The Iowa blueprint versus the Fever reality. At Iowa, Lisa Bludder built an offense that revolved entirely around maximizing Clark's abilities. The floor spacing was pristine. Shooters were always positioned in the corners. Screens were set at the perfect angles to free her up. The ball didn't stick in one player's hands unless it was Clark orchestrating. Now, fast forward to Indiana. The spacing collapses because teammates drift inside the arc when she drives. Off-ball movement is inconsistent, which means defenders can double Clark without fear of being burned by a wide-open shooter. And instead of constant motion to create passing lanes, too many possessions end with Clark dribbling against two defenders while the rest of the team stands flat-footed. When she points it out, subtly in the press or directly in the huddle, It's seen as criticism rather than problem-solving. That's a culture issue, and it falls directly on the coach. Why Clark's skills need a tailor-made system. Clark's not a one-size-fits-all player. She's more like Stephen Curry in the NBA, dangerous when given freedom, almost wasted when forced into rigid, predictable sets. Her deep shooting range changes defensive schemes before the game even tips off. But if you don't design an offense to take advantage of that, you're essentially playing 4-on-5 because her gravity is being wasted. At Iowa, they'd run staggered screens, elevator doors, and even misdirection plays to get her clean looks. In Indiana, too many possessions begin and end with her bringing the ball up, dribbling at the top, and being forced into a contested jumper with the shot clock running out. That's not an accident. That's a failure to adapt. The locker room dynamics nobody wants to talk about. Another layer here is how other players handle Clark's celebrity. Whether they admit it or not, her arrival fundamentally changed the power structure in that locker room. Players who were used to being the face of the franchise are now role players in the Caitlin Clark show. For some, that's fine. Winning is winning. For others, it's a bruise to the ego. When the coach doesn't actively manage that dynamic, resentment festers. Every star player who's ever entered a professional league has dealt with it. LeBron in Cleveland, Diana Taurasi in Phoenix, even Sabrina Ionescu in New York. The difference is that the successful cases had coaches who understood how to align egos, get buy-in, and make the star's success feel like everyone's success. White, so far, hasn't done that. And every time she says something minimizing Clark's role, whether intentional or not, she's signaling to the rest of the team that it's okay to treat her like just another player. Spoiler, she's not. Fans aren't just mad, they're worried. The Fever finally have something rare in pro sports. A star who sells out home and road games. Clark's presence has moved games into bigger venues. She's boosted merch sales across the league. The Fever are relevant nationally for the first time in years. But if fans start to believe the organization doesn't fully appreciate her, they'll get nervous. Nervous fans don't buy season tickets. They don't travel to away games. They start wondering, is she going to want out? The WNBA is a smaller league. Whispers turn into headlines fast. The timing couldn't be worse. The WNBA is in a moment of potential explosive growth. TV ratings are climbing. Sponsorships are increasing. For once, mainstream sports talk shows are spending serious time discussing women's basketball. Clark is a huge driver of that momentum. And yet, the team most closely tied to her success is sending mixed messages about her value. If you wanted to sabotage the Fever's momentum, you couldn't script it better than what's happening right now. This is about trust, not just talent. Clark will recover from her injury. She'll have more 30-point nights. She'll hit game winners and break records. But will she trust that the people running the Fever are putting her in the best position to succeed? That's the real question. Trust between a star and a coach isn't built in a single season. It's earned over time, in the way the coach handles adversity, responds to mistakes, and adapts to the player's needs. Right now, every public misstep chips away at that trust. What White could learn from other coaches. If White wants to turn this around, she doesn't need to reinvent the wheel. She can study how other great coaches handle their superstars. Steve Kerr, with Stephen Curry, built an entire offensive philosophy around spacing, movement, and letting the star's skill set dictate pace. Gino Auriemma at UConn balanced demanding standards with constant public praise to keep his best players confident and bought in. Mike Tebow in Washington let Elena Del Don's unique game dictate matchups, forcing opponents to play on the Mystics' terms. The common thread? They all leaned into the star's strengths instead of trying to fit them into a rigid, pre-existing plan. This could define the next decade of the Fever. If White can adapt and find common ground with Clark, the Fever could dominate the league for years. If not, they risk becoming the team that wasted one of the greatest talents women's basketball has ever seen. And history isn't kind to franchises with that label. The danger of letting this linger. Every game, every press conference where this tension is allowed to sit unresolved makes it harder to fix. Once the media narrative solidifies, White versus Clark, it'll follow the team into every arena. That kind of distraction isn't just bad for morale, it's bad for performance. We've seen it before. Teams with enough talent to win big, but internal rifts keep them from ever realizing their potential. Fans don't want to see Clark's prime years burned away in that kind of dysfunction. What needs to happen next? White needs to make 3 moves immediately if she wants to keep this from spiraling. Public reconciliation, a clear, sincere statement about Clark's importance, not just as a player, but as the centerpiece of the Fever's future. System overhaul, start running sets that mirror the off-ball movement and spacing Clark thrived in at Iowa. Locker room reset, hold a players-only meeting to get everyone on the same page about roles, expectations, and the fact that winning requires embracing the star, not resenting her. Because here's the truth, Clark's not going anywhere this season, but the clock is already ticking toward her next contract decision. And if she doesn't feel like Indiana is the place where she can win championships and be appreciated, she'll find somewhere that is. And when that happens, the blessing in disguise comment won't just be a bad soundbite. It'll be remembered as the moment Stephanie White started losing the best thing that ever happened to the Indiana Fever. The deeper you dig into this Stephanie White, Caitlin Clark situation, the more you realize this isn't just a coach misspoke story. This is a full-blown culture clash, a generational star colliding headfirst with a coaching philosophy that doesn't seem willing to evolve. And when you look at the big picture, you start to see why so many fans, analysts, and even former players are calling this one of the most pivotal crossroads in Indiana Fever history. Because here's the thing, you don't get too many Caitlin Clarks in a lifetime. Most franchises never do. And when you do get one, the playbook changes, literally and figuratively. The disconnect is everywhere. The problem between Clark and White isn't just about one offhand comment. It's about how decisions on the court keep failing to maximize Clark's skill set. You can see in the game tape, possessions where Clark gets the ball late in the shot clock with no movement around her. Sets where she's standing in the corner while less efficient shooters run high pick and rolls. Plays where the spacing collapses, leaving her to drive into 2 or 3 defenders. If you have a point guard with Clark's vision, why are you running a static offense? Why aren't you letting her dictate pace, run early offense, and force defensive mismatches? Instead, the Fever offense looks reactive, like it's adjusting after Clark makes a read, rather than setting her up to make the read in the first place. A missed marketing opportunity, too. It's not just about X's and O's, it's about optics. The WNBA is finally enjoying sustained national buzz, and Clark is one of the main engines behind it. Fans tune in for her deep threes, no-look passes, and fiery competitiveness. They buy tickets just to see her warm up. And yet, the Fever are treating her like a good player rather than a once-in-a-generation franchise cornerstone. When White downplays Clark's absence as a blessing in disguise, that's not just a coaching slip, it's a branding blunder. Sponsors, TV partners, and ticket-buying fans hear that and wonder if the Fever truly understand what they have. In sports, perception is everything. The Iowa comparison keeps haunting them. Clark's Iowa years have become the benchmark. At Iowa, every player knew exactly where to be when Clark initiated the offense. Cuts were timed to the millisecond. Screens were set at the perfect angles to free her. The system was designed so that if Clark didn't have a scoring lane, she'd have at least 2 passing options available. In Indiana, the opposite is often true. Watch a Fever possession, and you'll see teammates unsure whether to cut or space. You'll see Clark calling for a screen that arrives too late. You'll see 2 players accidentally occupying the same spot on the floor, dragging their defenders right into Clark's driving lane. It's not that the Fever don't have talent, they do. It's that the system doesn't consistently organize that talent in a way that plays to Clark's strengths. The locker room temperature. Behind the scenes, tension is inevitable. Clark's popularity skyrocketed the moment she entered the league. She's got endorsements, national media attention, and the kind of fan base that travels to away games. That shifts locker room dynamics, especially if other players feel their roles are shrinking. It's the coach's job to make sure that dynamic doesn't turn toxic. That means managing egos, reinforcing the idea that Clark's success benefits everyone, and creating opportunities for other players to shine in complementary roles. When White makes public comments that seem to minimize Clark, she risks alienating the one player who draws the most offensive attention and, indirectly, the most opportunities for her teammates. Why White's philosophy feels outdated. White clearly believes in a team-first approach, where no one player is above the system. In a vacuum, that's admirable. But in the modern WNBA, systems are built around stars, not in spite of them. Just ask Becky Hammon, who unapologetically centers Aya Wilson in everything the Las Vegas Aces do. The great coaches in basketball history understand that a generational player is the system. Phil Jackson didn't make Michael Jordan conform to a rigid offense. He adapted the triangle to maximize him. Gino Arima at UConn builds entirely different looks depending on his superstar. The philosophy is simple. Your best player dictates your identity. Right now, the Fever's identity feels like it's resisting that truth. The fan reaction isn't just noise. When Fever fans flooded social media calling for White's resignation, it wasn't just about defending Clark. It was about frustration that the team seemed stuck in the same losing patterns it's had for years. Clark was supposed to be the turning point, the player who could pull the Fever out of irrelevance. Instead, they're watching a superstar try to carry a roster without the structure or support she needs. And every time the coach makes a comment that could be interpreted as undermining her, it chips away at the hope fans had when Clark arrived. The risk of losing her long-term. Let's be clear, Clark is still under contract. She's not going anywhere this season or next. But players talk. Agents talk. If Clark's camp starts to believe the Fever aren't committed to building the right system around her, they'll explore options when the time comes. And if Clark leaves, the Fever lose not just their best player, but the media coverage, ticket sales, and national relevance she brings. That's not an easy thing to recover from a league where stars are rare and fan interest is fickle. What White could do to fix this right now? The situation isn't beyond saving, but it requires immediate, visible changes. Publicly clarify her commitment. White needs to make it crystal clear that Clark is central to the Fever's plans. Not just with generic "she's great" statements, but with specifics about how they're building the system to maximize her. Revamp the offensive scheme. More off-ball screens. More early offense. More plays designed to get Clark in motion rather than isolating her at the top of the key. Establish defined roles. The offense should have a clear hierarchy. That doesn't mean Clark shoots every possession. It means everyone knows where to be when she initiates. Private reconciliation. Whatever's been said publicly, White and Clark need to have a closed-door meeting to reset the relationship. Star coach trust is everything. Why this feels bigger than just the Fever. The WNBA's current growth spurt is fragile. Ratings are up, attendance is rising, and media coverage is expanding, but it's still early days. Clark's influence on that growth is undeniable. The way the Fever handle her will be seen as a test case for how the league treats its stars. If Indiana fumbles this, if they allow tension to push Clark away, it could reinforce the perception that the WNBA doesn't know how to market and protect its biggest assets. That's a dangerous message to send to sponsors, broadcasters, and young fans deciding whether to invest their time and money in the league. The bottom line, this isn't just about one comment or one game. It's about whether the Indiana Fever, and by extension, the WNBA, are ready to evolve into a league that embraces and builds around its superstars the way other professional leagues do. Because if they don't, Caitlin Clark won't be the only one thinking about her future somewhere else. And when she walks, she'll take a whole lot more than her jump shot with her.